Welcome back to the KTP podcast, where two Bucks kids are just keeping it real. If you have any questions or comments about anything we talk about, drop them below. Let's jump right into it. What did we do to get our first internships?
For me, I think there have definitely been a couple of clubs I joined after my first year. One of them was the Calendar, which is the event company that is there at UBC, and the other one was the CUS. So I was part of their elections committee for about a year. So I think those two clubs really opened me up to not really professional work experience, but more so like having organization hierarchy as such, having like a president, a VP, like a reporting system that kind of goes into different departments handling different things. You have like internal, external, things like that. I think that was pretty useful, but I think those kind of put me on the board a little bit, kind of got me out there, like talking to more people, understanding about the matrix culture for sure.
Yeah, similar for me as well. So I joined some CUS clubs, I joined some other student organizations on campus, pretty standard stuff where you're just working within organizational structure. So you're doing, maybe like some marketing for the CUS, or in my case, it was some work on their website. So, and just following the whole process, as in like pitching projects to the board and working with other team members within the CUS to kind of gather different requirements of like what the projects will look like, or the delivery, or accessing different things. So very similar to how you would work in a company, but again, it's just laid back, as in it's just within like a student context. That's where I got really solid experience, or that I still talk about when being interviewed. But another thing that also helped me was obviously, besides networking, you can try and reach out to people on LinkedIn and through UBC. Another thing that really helped me was doing certifications. A lot of times the school itself or different classes will give you the opportunities to do some courses like Microsoft Azure, AWS, or those are tech specific, or you can do like CFI if you're in finance, or like some CPA prep courses. It's a lot of great resources on those that you get provided for free, and these are like usually paid certificates. Another really great one that I used was Coursera. You can sign in with your student email and get one course for free every year. And those are all like university sponsored courses for tech, finance, accounting, like pretty much anything that you can find. And those look really good on your resume, especially if you don't have any formal work experience besides maybe like a retail job from high school or something like that.
Yeah, I think to add on, I think another big one is LinkedIn Learning as well. Like UBC has like a partnership with LinkedIn where a certain number of courses are offered for free, and those have like super high credibility, I'd say, especially when you're like after your first or second year, in terms of showing your capacity to learn to like external recruiters and things like that. So I think like doing those certifications are super helpful as well for in terms of certifications. So I think those are like probably a few things that we can kind of focus on, in terms of getting ready for your first internship. But what do you say about the role of co-op, the co-op office? Strictly speaking of Solder, right? How do you say they were involved with, like, in terms of getting your first internship, in terms of your support and things like that?
They had a couple of different career workshops, but they're very generic stuff. How to be professional when you're interviewing, when you're at an office, like personal support, kind of personal career goals and development. The co-op office has a lot to provide. Unfortunately, as students, we don't have those capabilities right away. They kind of expect you to just mass apply. That's how I got started as well. I just mass applied. Probably applied to like over 100 jobs for the first time around, and I landed a couple interviews. But I found those jobs mostly on my own. I didn't use a lot of the links on the co-op job board itself.
The co-op officer's role is pretty much just, give us like an aggregated job board. In terms of actually landing your own interviews in once a week, it's talking about like which jobs are open, but in terms of establishing connections and things like that, in that sense, like figuring out those things by yourself is quite important, I'd say. At least like in terms of opening up new opportunities, the co-op offer doesn't like really help you apply or like develop your application that much. That's what I'd say. But touching a bit more about like our internship experience, we've amongst the two of us worked at about 6 different companies, big name companies by now. Some of them are like Citibank, Scotia, KPMG, like RBC. So there's also a bunch of different companies that we've worked at, so we feel that we kind of do understand how the intern pay works, especially in Canada. So what would you say about like all these aspirations to work for big name companies? Like what's that all about?
I think you're better off applying for a lot of these big name companies, especially for your first couple of internships, because then employers, no matter who it is, whether it's a big name or small name, after that they can see that you're, a credible applicant, credible employee, because you've worked for a big name company that has a lot of established processes, in general, like very clear organizational structure. But the reality is that you're usually not going to be getting paid that much, especially as an intern. Like full time is a different story. It's again not as much, like something maybe more boutique, but probably expect like under $30 an hour, and that's still pushing it, especially for your first internship. Like, be expected to be paid around maybe $20 to $23 an hour for your first internship.
Yeah, it's about the same. But I think mine was a bit of an outlier. In my first internship, I got paid like about 27 an hour, which was on the higher end, even though it was for like a smaller company. But I think that's what we're trying to kind of touch upon here, is that a lot of these big name companies, even post grad, they don't really pay that much in terms of like a starting salary. But we understand that it's really good for like networking opportunities and kind of getting yourself out there for like a large number of people. But in terms of pay, they're really not like as high as you would expect them to be. But what we've kind of figured out is like some of the other smaller companies, like private owned companies, Series B, Series C companies, even in the Bay Area, even in Vancouver or Toronto, have all these like opportunities which not a lot of people really put an emphasis on. But those are the ones that have a higher payout, right? Like there's companies like Citadel, which probably not a lot of us know about here in Canada. But like interning for them is one of the hardest things to do and has like such a high payout, and not a lot of people, especially from UBC, actually compete for that role, even though the worldwide competition is pretty high. So I think like emphasizing on those kind of companies also has a good chance of improving your pay. That's what I'd say.
There's so many other smaller companies, like there's a lot of like smaller investment banking boutique firms, for example, or there's
I think Kearney was one of them.
Boutique consulting. Then there's like some tech companies too that pay even more than like Facebook, Google. There's like Databricks, Stripe, these kind of companies where a lot of people don't even hear about them, and they do also have business roles occasionally. Yeah, but what is it like working in these different cities or in these different industries?
Yeah, I think, okay, for context, so amongst the two of us, we've worked in Vancouver, Toronto, and Calgary. High level on these three places, I think the main tech and business hubs are probably Vancouver and Toronto, so let's just do like a comparison between them, right? I think working in Vancouver, I really liked it there. The culture was quite kind of laid back and open box, right? Like it was like if you have some new ideas, let them flow, let your managers and your employees know, and things like that. But I think Toronto has a lot more emphasis on that kind of a culture, on a culture of kind of leash in terms of like coming into the office, like the amount of people working within the city. So I think
in a place like Toronto, it's way more corporate, but again, you're compensating with the pay and the number of opportunities by living here. In any industry, like especially finance, even in tech nowadays, like there's as much tech jobs in Toronto, if not more, than in Vancouver. There's a lot of like big name US companies that have offices here as well compared to Vancouver. There are a couple, but not as many as Toronto. So it really just depends what kind of lifestyle you're looking for. If you're looking for more of like, you're going into office most days of the week, you're really like putting in those hours, that time, that effort, maybe even staying overtime or more, depends on your role, then Toronto is a good place to be. But again, if you want more laid back, then Vancouver's probably more your vibe. How is it like finding housing, or like just in general settling in when you're moving to a new place?
I think in my experience, I found the first 2 to 3 weeks to be pretty hard, because the place that you were living in before, you have like a set routine, you have your friends that you hang out with, the place where you drink coffee, the place where you play basketball, things like that. And suddenly you have to kind of get adapted to like a new place, figure out, the transit here, for example, figure out what are some nice places to eat, figure out how to get a transit card, like as simple as that. It gets really irritating whenever you move to a new place, especially one where there's so much hustle and things happening around all the time. But I think for me, I found the first 3 weeks to be pretty like uncomfortable, like just finding out where can I buy my groceries, like where can I go out to like chill on a Friday night or things like that. So those were not that great, and I think that also kind of ties into like how social you are as a person, right? Like if you want to spend more time, I guess young youth stuff, right? Like that's like clubbing or like those bars, these kind of things. Then Toronto is definitely like, I feel like a better place. But if you're more into like hikes and kind of like the nature side of things and you like beautiful landscapes, then definitely Vancouver is the better move.
Yeah, you have a lot more like nature things to do out in Vancouver, but here you're just pretty much stuck in the city. It just sometimes you kind of take that for granted. That's what I found. But yeah, moving on to, let's say we're wrapping up our internships pretty soon. What are some things we can do to succeed and get that return offer or get that recommendation from your manager or whatever else it may be? Some strategies that I've kind of learned over my time to do these things is that the first thing you can do is make your expectations clear to your manager or to your mentors that this is what I want to learn, and at the end of the day I want to return to this company, or I want to get that return offer for when I graduate. And they'll support you in that whole process, because at the end of the day all these companies, they hire interns to extend full-time offers to eventually. They want reliable and trustworthy employees that they've seen work before. So at the end of the day, they're also willing to reciprocate. Another thing you can do is, in your first couple of weeks, really just set up chats with different coworkers, kind of just build a casual relationship, ask them about their career journey, maybe where they see themselves going in their careers. Kind of just learn as much as you can from these new team members. Also, as long as you don't break anything by at the end of the day, then you'll also have a much higher chance of getting a return offer. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. But like I'd say, like when you're doing internships, you kind of have a little bit of a head down approach, just in terms of like the work. Like even if it's not super engaging and it's your teammates are kind of a pain in the ass sometimes and things like that, just make sure you kind of put up a good face for that a little bit, because what it then creates is a safety net for you, right? Like sure, you can probably find a better company, you can like definitely like renege the offer from this company if they give you a return. But then again, having just some kind of a backup plan always gives you that extra ability to jump like higher and do like better things. That's what I feel, because you have like that intention that, oh, now I have something to fall back on if like this interview doesn't go through. But then at the same time, you're also aiming for actually roles that you'll be interested in, because there's no reason for you to apply for another role that's not worthy to you, right? So I think in that sense, like it really creates that opportunity to kind of just return and come back to something. But I'd say like always try and keep a good relation, especially with the recruiter, because like the managers, they might keep changing from like team to team. The recruiters usually are pretty consistent for each department, like for tech or for finance, for operations, whatever. So I think having a good relationship with the recruiter, kind of updating them throughout your internship on things you're working on, kind of your expectations about returning to that particular company or not. So I think that's super important while you're trying to wrap up a decent internship.
Just keep your LinkedIn profile, keep your resume updated constantly. Just write down things that you do throughout your internship, so it's easier to come up with things to write down on your resume later, or when someone asks you about your experience. And try and get a recommendation as well, whether that's like a written one or on LinkedIn. As always, those kind of put your profile aside. They put you to an extra step. But that pretty much wraps up our episode for today. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If there's any comments or any feedback, please let us know. Thanks. Until the next one.
And that's it for today. Thank you for listening to our episode, and we'll catch you at the next one.